Hi everyone, thanks for having me. My name is Brian Hoang. I'm a software engineering grad from UT Dallas, and I'm the CEO of Survivor, the next generation of police training. Today I stand here to represent the 158 police officers who lost their lives in the line of duty in 2018, along with the 998 civilians who were shot and killed by law enforcement. This is not an isolated problem and shows up in most communities regardless of demographics. So we at Survivor spoke with over 100 police departments, which firmly believed that many of these incidents could have been avoided through enhanced training. But how do we train police officers to make life or death decisions in fractions of a second? Well, that's where Survivor comes in. But first, let me show you how I got here. I'm a first-generation Vietnamese American. Before I was born, my family had to endure the Vietnam War. On my mom's side, my grandpa became a prisoner of war for 13 years, while on my dad's side, the entire family had to flee the country illegally to escape the communists. And eventually, both sides met in the US and settled down in Texas. Growing up, I didn't have to experience the hardships of war, but I did share in the aftermath. My family of refugees bounced between low-wage jobs, so we were still trying to make ends meet. And because of this, my family instilled the values of education and work ethic into me from a young age, in hopes that one day I could live the life that they never had. Fast forward to high school. Turns out I was a math and science nerd, so I enrolled in the engineering academy, where I learned skills from robotics to programming. Soon after, I graduated 4th in my class and earned a full-ride scholarship to UT Dallas, where I graduated last May with a 3.9 GPA in software engineering. College is where curiosity led me to discover entrepreneurship and my apparently unlimited risk tolerance. And it started when, as an engineering major, first I burned out through 3 traditional internships. And instead of that, I became more interested in emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and virtual reality, especially with how they could be applied to solve large problems for millions of people at scale. Because of this, I founded 2 engineering organizations to democratize education on these cutting-edge technologies for the community. And within a year, we grew to support over 500 students with accessible learning resources. So this was my first exposure to entrepreneurship, and I absolutely loved the thrill of recruiting and empowering teams to achieve a greater purpose. So I thought, why stop there? In 2016, I founded a virtual reality studio called Emosis. Our starting goal was simply to build our portfolio and reputation through community showcase events. And it didn't take long until we started getting offered free booths at places like South by Southwest. In 2018, we leveraged our expertise to pivot to a technology consultancy. I drove to as many networking events as possible and closed the year with $150,000 in services revenue. And at this point, we wanted to become a product company, but most ideas were either unsustainable or they just didn't solve a large enough impact to get us excited. That is, until we appeared on a podcast and met a retired police officer. The second he put on our headset, he was blown away. Wow, those zombies were up in my face. That was so immersive. And then he asked us, have you guys started to consider using this to train the police? And he tells us about the constant liability and dangers that police face as a result of today's limited training. Classes are highly unrealistic because lectures are hands-off and low pressure, while live actors are very expensive because of the required manpower to cover just a few scenarios. As a result, many departments struggle to afford training, which causes worldwide inconsistencies. So in today's world of dangerous situations, there must be a better way to train our law enforcement. That was the impact that we fell in love with, and thus Survivor was born. We created a virtual reality training platform that helps our first responders improve their decision-making and response times. Not only do our training scenarios feel very realistic and allow you to make decisions in high-pressure environments, but they are also scalable and cost-effective for any organization. And since our consultancy was profitable, we had both the technical expertise and funds to incubate Survivor. Eventually, we spun out Survivor into a public benefit corporation with the mission to help protect our world's communities and first responders. Today, we have a wide variety of training scenarios, from domestic violence to school shooters, to prepare our officers for any situation. And since we have to build these software scenarios only once, that allows us to scale sales and recurring revenue while keeping our development costs low, which makes this a very sustainable business to run. And one more thing, one of my favorite things about us is that I'm so proud that we're the only company in this space that's emphasizing diversity. We randomize every suspect's race, gender, and clothing to ensure equal representation. And then we can track whether an officer may have an unconscious bias towards a certain demographic so that they can fix this proactively before making a mistake on the streets. Furthermore, our team has the perfect balance of technical and law enforcement expertise. My CTO and I previously co-founded our VR consultancy and leveraged our profits to bootstrap Survivor. Immediately after, we went out to recruit domain experts so that we would always be guided by law enforcement for law enforcement. And today, 3/5 of our leadership have a law enforcement background. We also built a strategic advisory board, which includes a retired chief of police, an Air Force colonel, and an award-winning VR professor. Our advisors have guided us through so many challenges, from navigating product market fit to refining our go-to-market strategy. And as a result, we've achieved significant progress. First, we signed on 5 pilots with police departments to gain rapid market feedback. After that, we closed an Air Force contract to expand to their first responders called the security forces. And right now, we're waiting on a $500,000 phase 2 contract because of how happy the Air Force is with Survivor. Soon after, we raised $320,000 from investors and built a sales pipeline of 77 government leads, including the New York Police Department and the US Department of Homeland Security, both of which reached out to us. And my team is currently demoing at the New York Police Department literally right this second, which is, I think that's so cool. And of course, we closed our first paying police department, which in this industry is the hardest hurdle to overcome. And one more thing is that Survivor became the top 1% of companies across 40 countries to be accepted into Techstars, a top global accelerator. But our vision doesn't stop there. Police is just the beginning. Whether you work in a fire department or private security, you can never train enough for a job that can kill you or someone else. Regardless, needless to say, not only does Survivor address a compelling societal need, but it is also a significant business opportunity.
2 minutes remaining.
Now, all that said, I've definitely had my fair share of challenges and failures, and which might include crying on the company couch a few times. So I'd like to leave you with the top 3 drivers that keep me going when I'm at my lowest. First, it's absolutely my team. We currently have 9 employees, projecting to grow between 13 and 21 in this next year, and I'm obsessed over making sure that they feel happy and heard. Did I spend enough one-on-one time with everyone in the manager meetings? Did I remember to restock the fridge with orange juice for the engineer who really likes orange juice? Their happiness is my priority, and I bend backwards to make it happen. Second, it's my desire to advance the global human condition. This is why I focus exclusively on large humanitarian problems. I studied engineering and gravitated towards entrepreneurship so that I could do good while doing well. I even became an entrepreneurship guest lecturer at my university and led 2 venture capital seed funds to accelerate my learning. And with Survivor, we help our communities go home at night, which is so exciting. We're going to change the landscape of public safety education no matter what. And third, I fight to ensure that my family will never have to endure financial hardships ever again. They sacrificed the world to me, and I share in their struggles. And so I'm committed to entrepreneurship until the very end, so that both my family and humanity can live to see a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Congrats. You have a great mixed intergenerational team. So I'm wondering, how does it work with your students versus kind of the police that you've brought on that maybe are I don't know if they're part-time or full-time. Just talk to a little bit about the team dynamics.
Yeah, we have 7 of the 9 on W-2 at the moment, and we're currently converting the other 2 to W-2 employees. It's either people who are very technical and specifically in virtual reality, or people who are experienced in law enforcement. We did the best job in this space of bringing the 2 together, which is why we've executed not only better, but also faster and more cost effectively. And it's a really good dynamic between the 2. We do a really good job of telling every employee, like, hey, our top priority here is public safety. This is why we're a public benefit corporation. If working with law enforcement and helping protect your communities is not your top priority, if you think you're going to slack around with that, then this isn't a good fit for you. And we make sure that we vet everybody to make sure we're aligned on that same page.
How are you managing school and your startup?
So I started the company during my sophomore year of college, and I basically just treated the 2 as 2 full-time jobs. The way I view it is that a company is completely apathetic to your personal circumstances. Either you execute and make it work, or you don't. And I basically just didn't sleep. I studied when I had to. I went to classes most of the time, and I did this business nights and weekends. I would travel constantly, and I communicate to my professors in advance, say, hey, I have this business sales trip or this conference I have to go to. But in the end, I held on and graduated with a 3.9 in software engineering, magna cum laude, I think that's how you pronounce it. And my mom's proud of that. Make mom proud.
Hi, it seems like you have accomplished a lot, so congratulations
Thank
on
you.
that. If you could go back, is there anything that you would do differently in building your business?
Is there anything I would do differently? I think my rule of thumb, I mentor a lot of university students to give back, and the thing I always tell them to do first is to gather as many aligned mentors as possible. These are the people who have been through these experiences, but also understand the hardships that you go through. And I think while we did do a good job with recruiting law enforcement expertise initially, I think even though school ends, education does not. And I wish that I probably could have gotten more mentors earlier on. I don't think there's such thing as enough. I mean, once we got into Techstars, we had this thing called Mentor Madness, where they literally had us meet 150 mentors over 2 weeks. And I still feel like I don't know anything sometimes, but I think the more like-minded or different-minded people that come together and show us different ways to think about the business, so we remain open-minded, there's just never enough of that.
Congratulations, Brian.
Thank you.
Question: Why GSEA? There are several options out there, and what have you experienced during this time with GSEA?
I think the thing with GSEA that stood out compared to most other programs and competitions is, and this really stuck out during the forum session yesterday, is how much you emphasize the internal culture and transparency. That's not really something I'm used to with these kinds of programs, and that's really important because as CEOs or as business leaders, it's really important to be with other people and find mentorship so you continue learning, and especially when you're at your lowest, when you're going through the rough times, and you can't really achieve any of that communication and progress unless you're transparent to begin with. And so GSEA did a really good job at lowering the barriers, and I think, especially in today's kind of social climate, I think that's something that we need more of, and GSEA embodies those values.
So have you completely funded organically, or have you received any outside investment?
We started with profits from the previous consultancy in Moses, and then last fall was when I went out and raised $320,000. We were planning to raise $500,000, but I cut it off at $320,000 because we were achieving our fundraising goals way quicker than we expected, which never happens in engineering. But we were really fortunate. Our team's been working really hard. And right now I'm planning to raise an upcoming round 2, so that we can continue compensating them, and hopefully I can make a little bit more than $30K salary. So.
Congrats, Brian. Good job. I have 2 questions for you. How much competition do you have out there that's doing specifically what you're doing with police training? And then I think as entrepreneurs, we need to know our strengths, but we also need to know our weaknesses. And what is your biggest weakness as leader of your company?
Absolutely. As far as competitors go, the largest competitors in this space use antiquated technology. So imagine huge TV, not this huge, but they're pretty big TV screens, and they play videos. And you, as a police officer, you're staying on the stage, you're trying to talk to and shoot at this TV screen. And the thing with the video is it plays from start to end. It does not respond or interact to what you say or what you do. And so they only train for one thing: shoot or don't shoot. You cannot train for verbal de-escalation. You cannot train for physical tactics. And so not only is VR a lot more immersive and better for knowledge retention, but it allows you to actually become immersed in an actual realistic kind of situation so that police officers can be situationally aware and conscious of what they're saying, try to be empathetic to these suspects. And at each time we've gone head-to-head with a competitor, we've won because of that, how we've approached product design. As far as my biggest weakness, I would say my biggest strength is recruiting, and the biggest weakness is the complete opposite, which is firing. That's something that, you know this, but I struggle really hard right now, especially with balancing compassion and fiduciary responsibility, where we have investors, we have stakeholders. My job is to do what is best for the company. But at the same time, you hear a lot about hire slowly, fire quickly. I've never been able to get myself to completely agree with that. I think there's a level of humanity in the mix somewhere. And while I don't avoid conflict, I try to approach these tough conversations in as compassionate a way as possible. And I still haven't figured out the perfect answer yet, but I do know that if it comes worse to worse, these people are my family, and I end the conversation by saying, I'm sorry I failed you, because I take ownership for the entire process. It's my fault, and I don't want to do that to my own family.
What makes you vulnerable?
What was that?
What makes you vulnerable?
What makes me vulnerable? It's interesting. So my family grew up in, and I were two totally different generations. They grew up in a culture of war and survival. I grew up in a culture here of self-actualization. And when I was in college, freshman year, I had an internship at Raytheon. So I had it all. I had their American dream. Like, we're talking stable salary, 401k with matching, healthcare, paid time off. But I was sitting in a cubicle for 8 hours a day, hearing my own blood flow, and I hated it. I burned out. And one of the toughest conversations I've had to make was when I walked to my parents at the end of that summer and said, I'm not going to accept this return offer. I know this is really upsetting, and you've waited your entire lives to see me get to this point, and I'm giving it up right here, right now. I'd rather start my own business, which I have at that point, and I know that's really difficult for you to hear, but I ask that you trust in all of the hardships I've overcome to this point. And so I think what makes me vulnerable is possibility of failing. I mean, I'll get up and start another thing after that if it happens, but it's letting my family down and the trust they've invested in me at that point. It's not easy for them to accept the path I've come down.
Quick question. We're running out of time, but a few of us are from New York, so that's great. You're meeting with the NYPD.
We're keeping you safe.
Who went out there and kind of just give us a quick view of the pitch?
Right now, my VP of sales and my CTO are there, and they actually sent me pictures of the setup. I'll show you after. And so right now, we know that the NYPD has seen several competitors at this point, and they've walked away unhappy with them. And so we're coming and saying we're way more dynamic. Our scenarios actually change in real time, so it's unpredictable. We have implicit bias training, which nobody else is focusing on right now. But also, we've accomplished these features in an actual cost-effective way, whereas others have an entry price point of easily 6 figures, where we have things in that range too, but it doesn't have to. But the one thing we can say that most other companies can't is that we've been guided by law enforcement for law enforcement. We recognize our limitations when we started this business, so we recruited that expertise as quickly as possible to learn from them and grow even faster.
How do you price the product, and are there add-ons, et cetera?
Hardware, average one-time upfront fee of $25,000. And then there's a software subscription on top of that, which we price based on the size of your police department. So most products are 6 figures, small departments can afford them, so we make it scalable so that public safety education is accessible to everybody. Thank you.